Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2026, and our dear friend, Carl Wilkerson, is here with us. Welcome, Larry.
Good to be with you, Nima.
Larry, let me start with the ultimatum of Donald Trump, which the deadline did, the it's going to be 8 p.m. today, Eastern Time. And he said what he posted is a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. And Larry, here is what the latest call that Fox News had with Donald Trump. They talked with Donald Trump moments ago. Here is what they reported.
Got off the phone with the president, and he called, and I said, "Listen, if you were to put odds on it, what were the odds that this is going to end up being a negotiated deal?" He said he wasn't going to put odds on it, but he said 8 p.m. is happening. That's what he said. He said it is. If we get to that point, there is going to be an attack like they have not seen. Now, he's sticking to that at this point. Now, he said if negotiations move forward today and there is something concrete, that could change. But at this hour, he didn't want to put odds on it, but he said it is moving forward with the plans that we have. That's a huge deal. And obviously, we all think that it's a thing that he's putting out there to say, don't do this. He says he doesn't want to do it, but he is, at this hour, sticking to it and saying it might be likely if they don't come to the table.
Brett,
Yeah. You know what's so strange, Larry, about this whole negotiation that they're talking about, that there is no negotiations on the part of Iranians. There is no talk.
Bingo. You're listening to a man who is growing, and not just Donald Trump, that Fox newscaster too, is growing increasingly frustrated, increasingly exasperated that everything hasn't gone swimmingly in the way he thought it would go. And I suspect the way Hegseth told him it would go. Maybe not General Kane, but Hegseth probably was as sycophantic about telling him everything would be copacetic, everything would be terrific, it'd be over quickly, as anybody else in the administration, and even Trump himself, because they're cut from the same cloth, Petey and Donald. What you're looking at is a president who doesn't know how to get out of this. He has no idea how to get out of it. He's just been handed a colossal tactical defeat in the desert. I think Larry Johnson and others have parsed it quite well. I've heard some of the same things, but I think we lost quite a few aircraft, and I think we lost some troops. And he's not being honest about that. He's not telling the American people. He's not telling the Congress that this has happened. He took a defeat. He took a in-your-face defeat. It was all designed to do a special mission with regard to the nuclear reactor. And Xi just, in his remarks in Istanbul, and boy, did he look tired. I don't think I've ever seen him look so tired. And I've been following him pretty closely here for the last 6 months or so. He just looked tired, and he was not stumbling over his words, but he was slurring them just a little bit and searching for the right English word. I've never seen him do that, but he's usually very, very polished. He's obviously tired, incredibly tired. I don't blame him. But he was saying they didn't attack a nuclear reactor. They attacked the United Nations. They attacked the International Atomic Energy Agency. They attacked the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They attacked international law. They attacked a country abiding by all of its commitments in terms of nuclear power. That's what they attacked. You people need to understand this is a rogue nation. It is tearing up everything that we have created in the world that we call international law before your face. And now, he didn't say this, he probably would later. He was taking questions. And now we're getting ready to, after having announced it, according to Donald Trump anyway, perpetrate another genocide. And note that I say another genocide, because without the United States of America, the genocide in Gaza could not have been carried out, not the way it was. So we're getting ready to perpetrate a second genocide on a second president's watch. And this one has just announced it to all and sundry from one end of the world to the other. This is something I never thought I would see in my life. This is Hitler come back as an American.
Larry, you mentioned the operation. Donald Trump yesterday tried to, to make his case about how successful was this operation. But you mentioned you believe that was some sort of raid in Iran.
It was, and it featured multiple C-130 aircraft, both refuelers and transports. It featured Black Hawks. It featured, as we saw, overhead air cover, F-15 in this case. It featured little birds, probably OH-6, like I flew in Vietnam, for example, much modernized and really high tech now. But it featured everything that you might expect Delta or SEAL Team 6 or those two together to use. And it failed. It didn't work. I mean, all I could think about, I was listening to Larry talk about it, but I'd heard it from another gentleman. And all I could think about was the desert. Remember the desert under Jimmy Carter when we had the big helicopter?
The Bass.
Yeah, it was called Eagle Claw, I think, Operation Eagle Claw. Yeah. And it was a disaster, but we admitted it. We had a president in the White House who wasn't going to lie about it. We admitted it, and we canceled the operation. We didn't go ahead with it. Major Meadows got stuck in Iran. I knew Major Meadows. He had to E&E his way out of Iran because he was the one that was going to be meeting them at the place where they were keeping the bulk of the hostages and introduce them to the location and guide them in and everything. This is a disaster that they're hiding. They're hiding it. I haven't heard any real debrief or testimony or whatever as to what really happened. I suspect a few people died too.
We had, I don't know if you saw, we had a lady, the documents of a lady in that, that scene. They have just, they were just opening up the documents. Let me bring the video here because it shows the documents they were. Yeah. Here is the moment they find the document, and you see the lady, Amanda M. Ryder, and nobody's talking about her anymore, and even nobody mentioned her name in the United States.
Yeah,
and these are.
I can't imagine that they would bring someone like that. Looked like a civilian to me. Didn't look like a military person. So unless she's a nuclear expert or something like that, they felt her expertise was necessary.
She was on B2, visa of Israel. And, the visa for tourists and, the people to go and visit Israel. And she was part of this operation.
Yeah, anytime you see anything happening in Iran, on the ground in particular, but a lot of the times in the air too, count on Israel being there. Count on Israel being an integral part of the operation in one way or another, either along for intelligence provision or along to actually help with kinetic action. They're going to be there. And by the way, I'm sure you're going to ask me about this, but it's looking worse than 2006 right now in Lebanon for the IDF. They are getting their butts handed to them. So you got Iran. Ooh, Trump better live up to his promise. Israel being pounded ceaselessly with missiles from Iran. Tel Aviv was described to me today by a longtime citizen of that city as burning. And you got Lebanon. And you got Gaza unfinished. Israel is not looking too good.
Larry, when you look at the situation right now, Donald Trump talking about putting an end, a whole civilization will die tonight. What comes to your mind? Is he talking about nuclear weapons? Because we had the same sort of rhetoric with J.D. Vance. He's in Hungary. He said he was there. I don't know if he's going to help Orban in Hungary, because right now nobody likes Donald Trump, and
nobody likes Vance either.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually,
and how is that going to be helpful for Orban? But putting that aside, when it comes to he said we have the tools that haven't been used so far. I think the only tool that he's talking about is going to be something big as a nuclear bomb. What is your understanding of that?
Well, I listened to John this morning, John Mearsheimer. I think he was on the Judge's Show, and I think John pretty well. He originally used the image of the escalation ladder some weeks ago, no, probably months now, and he talked about us being on the bottom rung or the next rung or whatever. And at that particular time, John was not willing to go the full route, if you will, to use of nuclear weapons. He was a little more cagey this time, but he was also, like me, really worried, I think. And when it came to describing what Trump was doing, I don't think I've ever heard such forceful language from Professor Mearsheimer about what Trump had done in his announcement. He announced that he was going to commit a genocide. It's that clear. It's that plain. He says he's going to eradicate a people. Well, it's not too far from that statement if you think he's serious to use of nuclear weapons, because he isn't going to eradicate them with conventional means. There's just no way. He could stay at it for 10 years and he wouldn't eradicate them. He might bring them to their knees and get them finally to say, I quit. I don't even think he's going to do that, even if he stays at it forever, and he's going to run out of a lot of what he needs to do it with. But with nuclear weapons, it would be an entirely new dimension, and it brings Russia and China and several other powers, Pakistan comes to mind immediately, into the fight and into the fray. I listened to Sergei Lavrov talking. They asked him a question. He's in Istanbul, I believe. Istanbul was up on the board behind him. But they asked him a question from the audience about, did he believe the Bahrain proposal for control of the Strait of Hormuz was a good proposal? He didn't even bat an eye. No, it's not. So that tells me that they know exactly what Iran is thinking, and Iran knows exactly what they're thinking. So we're looking at the potential. Were Trump to use nuclear weapons in a massive way against Iran, I do not think the rest of the world would take it lying down. I think we'd probably be off to the races with competitors, principally Russia and China, going to their arsenals and checking things out and getting ready, because this is simply a step too far. It's not something anyone should be talking about, even in threats like Donald Trump is. But that's what people are now talking about. Serious people are talking about what he might have meant by that comment. That's not good. That's not good at all. And I think we've seen that what we have for our president right now borders on maniacal, borders on megalomania. We know about the narcissism. We know about all the things that psychiatrists and psychologists have said about the case of Donald Trump. But I think what we're seeing now is true megalomania. I think he's lost his rocker, as we used to say. He's off his rocker, as we used to say. And there's no one around him to rein him in. J.D. Vance isn't going to do it. J.D. Vance doesn't have the courage to do it. No one else is going to do it. Thune's not going to do it. Johnson's not going to do it. Johnson's too busy wishing for the Armageddon to come about. You can't make this stuff up. These people are serious about Jesus and this war being for Jesus. People like Johnson, people like Ted Cruz. And Trump doesn't give a hang about Jesus. I doubt he could spell his name, but he uses it, and he has got it now to the point where he's got all these different allies behind him that are crude, indifferent, stupid, crass, cretins, religious zealots. And plus, he's latched by an umbilical cord to the next person in the world most like him, Bibi Netanyahu. Not in terms of dumbness, because Bibi's pretty smart, but in terms of just being a cretin and bordering on megalomania and getting more and more like that because he's so desperate about his own personal situation. And he's desperate now because Israel is being destroyed. It is being destroyed on several fronts. That's got to be plaguing Trump somewhat too, because I imagine some of those big billionaire Jewish Americans and others who are ultra-Zionists are plaguing him in terms of what he should do and what he should continue to do to Iran. They're behind him, pushing him hard, because this is what Netanyahu wants. He wants Iran in absolute chaos, disorganized in chaos. All of its ballistic missiles searched out and destroyed. All of its uranium searched out and destroyed. That's what Israel wants. At the same time, it wants Lebanon. It wants Gaza. It wants the West Bank. It wants all Jerusalem. This is quite a combination of thieves and murderers.
I think the language that Donald Trump is using is similar to what Benjamin Netanyahu was using before Donald Trump. But
what is one another? It's like an echo chamber.
Yeah, exactly. But the difference is, Larry, when you represent a country like the United States, it's a huge responsibility as the president of the United States. It's not just Israel. No, Netanyahu can say whatever he wants to say, but as the president of the United States, it's important what you're using, the way that you're expressing yourself, your feelings. And that's hugely problematic because they see the United States, they don't see Donald Trump himself. Because Donald Trump right now is the face, is the United States, is the top, is the head of the United States as the president. He has the power to use nuclear bombs. That's why it's so important. No one else has this sort of power to use nuclear bombs. This is the problem that the people, this is the main concern on the part of the people who are learning, who are hearing Donald Trump talking this way.
Let me say two things. One, don't make too light of Bibi Netanyahu. He is as dangerous as Donald Trump is in his own way. He's apt to use a nuclear weapon or two also. Wouldn't that be fun? Israel tossing a few out there and the United States tossing a few more. So I don't discount Netanyahu in terms of the region or in terms of his ability that way to impact global relations and global security. When you put them together, you really have a combination that feeds off itself, back and forth, back and forth. And they feed off their desperation too. And both men are very desperate right now. And it shocks me when I think to myself, would my military allow this president to hurl nuclear weapons at another state? And my mind can't say positively no. That is a very disquieting thought. I never thought I would think that. I never thought a president would use a nuclear weapon under anything other than having been attacked first with nuclear weapons. That's the way I thought about it for the entire time of the Cold War. We will not initiate nuclear weapons use, despite what we did against Japan. We will not initiate. We will only respond. And that's our deterrence. And that's the reason we need to have a lot of weapons because they're going to get destroyed in that initial strike. And we have to have enough to respond. That provides deterrence. Now I'm looking, as you just suggested, at not only Bibi Netanyahu, a major non-NATO ally in Southwest Asia, possibly using a nuclear weapon, but us joining him. And if my military doesn't stand up to this president and say no and walk out and refuse to execute, and I'm not confident of that anymore. I wouldn't have thought that as many have executed what we've done thus far would have done it. I wouldn't have thought that those ships would have fired those tomahawks at that school. And the excuse that they didn't know has been blown away for me because I've seen the onboard camera video of those tomahawks approaching that school, what is clearly a school. And besides, they've attacked many other targets. They're just as big a war crime as that school. I would never have thought my military would participate in that to the degree that they have to this point. So what am I to conclude about their willingness to participate in Donald Trump's destroying another civilization?
You know, the tweet that he did, the post on his Truth Social, in which he was calling Iranian, bastards, crazy bastards.
Same thing Bibi does. Same thing Bibi does. You got to demean them. Before you kill their men, women, and children and babies, you got to make sure you demean them. You got to say they're a threat. You got to say they're terrible. You were great once, but you aren't great anymore. You're terrible now. You got to do that. But still, don't our people have a mind? Don't they see what's being done? When was the last time an Iranian attacked you, American citizen? When was the last time a missile landed in Texas? When was the last time an Iranian got off a boat and shot somebody? When was the last time you even saw an Iranian, if you ever did in your whole damn life? Why don't we wake up? Why doesn't this country wake up and understand it has not just a tyrant, but a megalomaniac as its president, who is about to possibly already has unleashed a genocide in Gaza and is unleashing one in Iran, and maybe is going to go further to the nth degree with nuclear weapons. Now, I don't think he is. It's not my feeling in my gut that he's going to do that. Not even Donald Trump. But just the fact that there's a possibility of it disturbs me greatly. And a possibility my military will go along with it disturbs me even more greatly.
You know, Larry, somehow it feels for me that he's feeling that he's playing God, or somehow God gave him some sort of mission for Israel, for something. It's so delusional, the way he's talking. It seems that I don't know how to describe that. This guy is so dangerous.
I don't either. I don't think it has a religious overtone to it, though. I don't think Donald Trump has a religious bone in his body. But in terms of what you're describing, you're right. I think he thinks he's God.
Larry, how does the mission, the operation, the rescue operation, as they want to call it, the rescue, it wasn't a rescue operation, it was a raid, but how is that going to play out for the ground invasion of Iran? It seems that as time goes by, they're getting serious about doing something. As we talk, today we've learned that they're hitting the Khark Island. The Khark Island, which was mentioned before, the invasion going to happen there. They're destroying the defensive forces, the defensive equipment in that island, then go after, capture the island, whatever that would be. And how do you see these two helping or somehow getting some sort of lessons from what has happened so far?
Let's say you put a military force of significant size or even modest size on Khark Island, the Forbidden Island. How are you going to resupply it? How are you going to keep it there? How are you going to sustain it? How are you going to water it and feed it? How are you going to gas it? How are you going to resupply the ammo and everything? How are you going to do that? Because once you're there, identified as being there, you are a target. And Iran has shown that it has an exquisite capability anywhere within the region to target things. Just take a look at Bahrain, for example, not very far away. So I don't understand how you could do that other than just to destroy their most important oil facility. And in that way, you probably are going to take a lot of Iranian oil off the market, at least initially. So what are you going to do then? I got my oil guys, and we talked about, okay, Russia feels pretty confident that it can weather this because it's sitting on lots of oil. Trump obviously thinks that the United States can weather it because he's sitting on not only what we have, which is the largest supply in the world, but also Venezuela, if he needs it. It's in his back pocket, you know. So they think between the two of them, and I would be willing to bet you they've had a telephone conversation to this effect. They think that both of them can ride out whatever recession might be coming, induced by low energy supplies, unlike the rest of the world, just about the entire world, including Europe. But to what end and to what purpose? Putin to make money, Trump not so much to make money off of oil sales, but Putin certainly too. I don't see anything beyond that, though. And why would you want, especially if you're Vladimir Putin, involved as he is now, still trying to wrap up the special military operation, why would you want the world to be suffering so dramatically while you ostensibly do well? I mean, I just don't understand that, especially not given all the connections we have now and the need of one country for another country's production, whatever, and vice versa. I just don't understand how we can think that we can be autarkic, that we can survive in a world only depending upon ourselves. And yet it seems like both men, Trump for sure, Putin maybe, are oblivious to this potential for a real global crisis, economic crisis. And now that the Houthis are in it, and apparently doing quite well, thank you very much, they've been fairly consistently hitting Israel themselves. And there are people who are already talking about changing their routing, going around the Horn or whatever, and not going through the Red Sea. And if that persists over a period of time, then you're jacking up the cost of commodities, soybeans, corn, whatever is flowing. You're jacking up that price by anywhere from 2 to 3% to maybe even 11 or 12%, depending on the commodity and the distance having to travel and the costs that shippers incur. So, guess what? I just heard too. This really takes me to my geopolitical, geostrategic theory, which I articulated probably the best I've ever done for Glenn Dyson the other day. Just came on me. I got it. I you get these epiphanies. Guess what they're bombing right now? Guess what? We're bombing in Iran right now, relentlessly. China's railroad. Didn't I tell you? We're bombing it everywhere we can get to it. And other railroads too, but we're bombing the bejicky out of that one.
Yeah. Larry, here is some photos from what has happened in Iran. You look at the argument on the part of Donald Trump is those planes were, somehow stuck in the sand. That's why they couldn't get out and they tried to destroy it. But you look at the picture number 6, you see what has happened, the bending of, what the damage that is happening to the plane. And then you see in picture number 5, and you see there has to be some sort of crash. Then the airplane or the aircraft hit the ground somehow. That was the main reason for such a damage happening to the plane. And it doesn't seem that Donald Trump, for such a, more than an hour, they were all mentioning, how the mission was successful, and they're doing this and that. They stuck in the sand. The sand was so wet and something like that, and they couldn't get out of it. Then they tried to destroy everything on the ground. It doesn't. This is not Donald Trump for more than an hour just explaining each and every details of what has happened. It's a scenario written by, I don't know, Pete Hegseth for him.
Yeah. My son flew those airplanes in the active Air Force for most of his time in the active Air Force, about 14 years, C-130 Hercules in different varieties. Now, looking at those pictures, those look like the special operations variety, which is equipped with a lot of things that the regular Hercules is not. But that said, a Hercules is one of the best airplanes on the earth for carrying cargo, for carrying troops, paratroopers, for landing in unprepared airstrips and things like that. And the special ops versions are very robust for doing that. So either they had terrible intelligence in terms of the soil and in terms of the landing area, or that was enemy damage, or a little bit of both, perhaps. So just to say that, well, it's the most prolific airframe in the world now. I think it replaced the C-47 or /DC-3 as the most used airframe in the world. And ours are very sophisticated now. The J model, for example, and that model there for the special ops, very sophisticated aircraft. So my guess as a military professional would be that something else happened to them other than wet sand. Didn't look like gear failure to me. It looked like other things. Your prop hits the ground when your gear fails, if it fails in a certain way, and then the prop just more or less bends itself or disintegrates. It's hard to tell from those pictures, but that was lousy intelligence if you landed in some place where you're stuck in the sand. We didn't even do that during Eagle Claw. During Eagle Claw, we didn't even know what we were doing during Eagle Claw, and we mixed the services. We had one service pilots flying another service's helicopters. Absolutely stupid. One of the reasons we created Delta afterwards was because we didn't want to repeat that kind of era. And yet you didn't see that sort of thing. What happened in Eagle Claw was in the sand, hovering one of those big monstrous helicopters with a pilot who wasn't even used to the helicopter. We call it whiteout in snow. You call it sand out in sand. You can't see. You create this sand cloud around yourself and you can't see. And in not seeing, he backed into one of the C-130s, destroyed the helicopter and the C-132. So that was not due to not understanding the landing area. It was not due to any of those intelligence failures. It was due to pilots who didn't know what they were doing in a way they should have in airframes with which they were unfamiliar. Dumb thing to do, but nothing like what this was. If it was an intelligence failure that said, you can land there. Oh, no, we can't. We're sinking. Why wouldn't you have an Israeli or a turncoat Iranian or whatever go over there and bring you some soil for a sample? Why wouldn't you do what you needed to do to find out what the soil was like where you planned on landing? That story doesn't wash. Or if it does wash, you got a lot of incompetent people doing this.
Yeah. Donald Trump says that in his latest post, he said, God bless Iranian people after hitting, destroying the civilization in Iran. Then at the end,
I'm going to destroy you, but God bless you.
Yeah, exactly. And then, what General Kane said yesterday, Larry, was somehow amazing, because the whole argument of hitting Iran and going like, we are going to help the people of Iran, we're going to liberate the people of Iran. But General Kane yesterday said every single Iranian that owned a small gun or rifle was shooting at us in this operation. This is something totally different from what we've heard so far from the administration.
Yeah, I listened to Trump talk till I was almost sick about how Iranians had been so brave. They had been so brave and moved towards the barricades. And all of a sudden, bam, right between the eyes. And the snipers, this is the president talking. The snipers were on the roof and they were shooting the Iranians as they came on to overthrow them, shooting them right between. A woman, he said, a woman was hit right between the eyes, and you saw the tears as the bullet went between her eyes. You know, this is the president of the United States telling lies. But I don't think they came from whole cloth. I think somebody told him that crap. Some of these people, like the MEK, like the Pahlavi family, whatever, or like Mossad or CIA, they told him that this was a uprising, and it would have succeeded if the IRGC snipers had not been thousands of them up on top of these buildings shooting these people. Remember how Pence made that remark? Turn around and thank your Mossad agent. Push them forward, get them to go forward, get them to go forward, get them to get killed, you know. But Trump was treating it as if it were a genuine revolution in process, and those bloodthirsty Iranians in the government shot them all down. That's the way he was pushing it. Now, if he believes that, if he really believes that, then he does have somewhat of a motivation for doing what he's doing, not to do a genocide, not to do what he's been doing. But who's lying to him to that extent? Who's giving him this crap? Yeah. And who's not disabusing him of it? I'll tell you who's not disabusing him of it. That bitch Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard, it was so disappointing.
So disappointing is an understatement.
Donald Trump said that he sent a lot of weapons to Iranians, a lot of weapons, and he believed that it's in the hand of the Kurds. And he said himself yesterday that there were he sent a lot of them to Iranian people, to protesters in Iran. Right. He mentioned.
Right.
And Larry, when I look at what has happened in Iran, because I was in Iran, you remember, I was in December, in January. It's all about, you look at what has happened in Maidan, in Ukraine. The snipers hitting at both protesters and security forces.
Right.
And making the chaos in the country.
Yes.
I think they did it again in Iran. And they were prepared. Militarily, economically, they did everything to bring down the government.
Yep. And it didn't work. It did not work because they never had the bulk of the people on their side. It did not work. Didn't work with the MEK, Pahlavi, or any of those cretins from outside Iran. It didn't work with the CIA, Mossad, MI6. It didn't work. It was Kermit Roosevelt revisited that did not work. And if you go back and you look at that revolution, I'm serious now, when you go back and look close at that, look at some of the really good writing on it. Both Iranian, I made sure I read Iranian writers too, because I knew that English would be, British and American would be somewhat one-sided. There was some good stuff. But when you read the Iranian side of it, you understand some of the things, like when I read about Reconstruction and read Southern historians as opposed to reading Northern historians, very different angle on the same events. And what you see, I think very vividly, is the reason Kermit Roosevelt and the coup that overthrew Mossadegh on the second try, the first try failed. And Kermit was actually telling CIA headquarters, I'm getting out of here. I'm not going to go ahead. And they talked him into staying and trying again. The reason that try again worked was because of Mossadegh. He did not want to see his people dying around him like they were dying. And they were dying in the same fashion you just described. It wasn't Iranians killing them. It was the people the CIA had hired and brought in and paid handsomely to kill them. That's who was killing them. And he said, stop. I'll step down. I'm leaving. That's how that coup came to work. because an Iranian leader didn't want to see his people die anymore.
Today we had the case of Bahrain at the UN to be voted against, the military operation against what is going on with the Strait of Hormuz, which was, vetoed by Russia and China. And nobody can believe that it was Bahraini, initiative. It's going to be U.S. together with Saudi Arabia, an initiative on these two countries, or maybe Israel.
I thought the Bahraini leadership unasked the whole place. Where are they? I'm told reliably that they left. Once that refinery went up, they left. So they must be where, in New York or something like that. They're working on their deals outside of Bahrain, I suspect, because that was my information, was that they just the royals just left, which made me ask myself, why don't the people take the country over now if they're gone? I suspect it's because they left some military there.
I think something big is going to happen in the region, Larry. Not only in Bahrain, in Kuwait, UAE, and these countries, in the near future, something big gonna happen there. And
if they join the fight, they're going to get slaughtered. That's my view. The Persians are going to eat them up. That's my view. If little Sparta, Riyadh threw its National Guard in there, its Praetorian Guard, which is just there to protect MBS, they'd get chewed up in a month. They'd be gone. There wouldn't be any military left for any of those Arab states. If you want to really get something going that's going to change the complexion of the entire region very rapidly, invade Iran. You guys invade Iran. You Qataris, you Bahraini, you Emiratis, you Saudis, invade Iran. Bring Egypt if you'd like. I don't consider Egypt an Arab country. Bring Jordan if you like. He wouldn't come. He's too chicken. But you're right. I think if we move on to another tier of targets, another set of targets, which Iran has said it is going to do, it's been very circumspect about making everybody know what it's going to do. And they hit that tier with the same devastation they did the first, then we have a global recession for sure, and maybe a global depression. And even with all the oil the United States has and all the oil Russia has, well, let's say this. First of all, in Europe, it'll be $25 a liter. In California, it'll be $10 a gallon, $15 a gallon. In my state of Virginia, it'll be $6 or $7 a gallon or more. This is what happened to us when we did the 2009 disruption exercise in Beijing. $200 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate and a little bit more for Brent crude. Insurers wouldn't insure. Shippers wouldn't ship. That's where we'll be if Iran goes to Ras Tanura and further into Saudi Arabia and really destroys exquisite petroleum production facilities and refineries, and probably kills a number of the crew, because you can't hardly avoid it, that's in that complex at the time the missiles strike. They've been very careful at Prince Sultan, up in Kurdistan, where they struck the Israeli Mossad MI6 facility. They've been very careful to just hit the people who are in it, or to just hit the airplanes that belong to the U.S. They have had some incidental casualties, but they've been very careful. Compared to us, they've been extremely careful. I don't think they'll be careful this time. I think they'll let it all hang out. If I were the king of Jordan, I'm not sure I'd sleep in my palace.
Jordan is so, just imagine how many Palestinians are living in Jordan, the second.
2.5 million last time I checked.
Yeah.
I remember when King Hussein, sitting down with my good friend at that time, I got a watch from him. Beautiful watch too. Absolutely beautiful watch. No one knows how to repair it though, because it was made especially for Hussein. It has his crest on it. But he says, maybe I have 30,000 that'll be with me. And at that time, I have 5 million Palestinians. I have to be very careful.
Yeah. Larry, the last communication, the last response on the part of Iranian was 2 days ago before, because today we've learned that it was the day before yesterday. Today they said that they canceled all the communications with the United States through Pakistani, Turkey, and all of that. There is nothing going on right now. Communication, letters, messages, nothing.
So the 5-point plan that Pakistan and China produced just went boop. It's dead. I figured it.
You know, yeah. What was amazing to me that Iran, one of the, it was the first line. The first point was, if this war gonna end, it's gonna end on all fronts. It's gonna end Iran, Hezbollah, Gaza, all together. It's not gonna be just about Iran.
Yeah, I admire them for that. I admire them for being that way. They're the only people in the freaking world standing up for the Palestinians. Just like Cyrus the Great stood up for the Jews, they're standing up for the Palestinians. Now, you can say it's self-interest. You can say whatever you want. They are the only people in the world, except for the Houthis, standing up for the Palestinians.
The other point, Larry, was the Strait of Hormuz. Here is what Washington, here is what the Washington Times said about, the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is Iran's new nuclear bomb. And, when they're talking about, nuclear bombs, a lot of that, but it is economically a nuclear bomb that is happening. That's why the situation is making Donald Trump so desperate, because he's not in charge anymore. He reminds me of Zelensky in his office when he said, you don't have the cards, Yeah. Right now, Donald Trump is pretty much in the same position.
I've been kind of waiting for Arachi to use that expression. He's too much a gentleman to do it. But I've been waiting for him to just look into the camera one day and say, the president of the United States does not have the cards. The Strait of Hormuz, though, as we found out in 88 and 89, when we were intimately involved in it at Pacific Command, is a double-edged sword in many respects, or maybe even a triple or a quadruple-edged sword, because you have a number of things that are impacted there. And if it gets to the point where you truly are causing a global depression, then the whole world's going to come together to open it. I mean, it may be one ship from Britain, one ship from Germany, one ship from Italy, but they're going to come down there and try to open it. But
the reality is that the strait is not closed. The reality is that.
I understand.
They let the French tanker pass in. You see the Iraqi, Indian.
What we did was we shouldered the strait passage that was critical in effect, and then ships could go through because no one could mine the waters, or it was difficult to mine the waters. The Iranians figured out a way to do it one time, or more than once, but it just gave the shippers and the insurance companies that were behind them confidence to sail through gray bottoms, if you will, back and forth. Now, Iran could do, as you're saying, Iran could do the very same thing just by selectivity. And if the selectivity is in the world's favor, by and large, 60% is getting through, 70% is getting through, they're going to give the middle finger to the United States. They don't care, as long as what's getting through is getting to them.
Larry, do you feel that the end of NATO is coming?
Done. It's over. It's finished. Those people in Brussels are just sitting there with their stars on their shoulders, having a gab fab and drinking eating chocolate and drinking coffee. That's all they're doing. NATO's done. It's toast. It's finished. It just remains for a series of elections in Germany, France, England, Britain, probably in Norway, probably in Sweden, to ramify it, to drive it home, because they're going to understand. I have to say that Putin could disturb this. He could disturb the momentum with which he's succeeding in his second strategic objective, to see to the disestablishment of the NATO alliance. He could do something down in that southern corridor that would awaken some people in Europe that he might not be everything he says he is, and that they need to keep their powder dry. And that might, at least temporarily, give some adhesive to NATO. But if it keeps on going the way it is right now, and all he does is consolidate that southern corridor and take Odessa, no matter how many people it takes him to do it, and they're not doing that well. If he does that, though, and I think it's inevitable, if the Russian people stay with him and he keeps forces intact, then he's going to take Odessa. Then Zelensky's going to have a country that has nothing, really. It has no access to the sea. It's totally dependent on Russia to get to the sea. It'll have partisans all throughout that rump state of Ukraine that'll be giving the Russians hell. But I don't think the Russians will mind that too much. They'll probably put up fences, whatever, and say, okay, do your thing. When you cross that fence, we'll kill you. This could be a partition that lasts for 100 years. I mean, think about all the partitions that have existed in Europe in the last 1,000 years. The so-called this line, the so-called this line, the so-called this line. I just don't have too many fond hopes for Europe settling itself out anytime soon. The key will be Germany, of course. The key will be Germany. Who do they bring in after this current group of nincompoops? And who develops their foreign and security policy? And who revamps their economy, and with whom do they ally themselves in order to do that? There's only one answer to that question. It's in Moscow. Maybe this election with Viktor Orban, even if he's beaten, maybe it'll show us something. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that Europe looks a lot more like 1930s Europe than it does 1960s Europe.
Germany's situation is pretty much similar to some of these GCC countries, because they had American base in their countries, and with the war in Ukraine, how the situation went on with the Nord Stream pipeline, how devastating that was for their economy. It seems similar to what is happening to the GCC countries and with American bases for such a long time, Larry. They paid for everything in their countries.
Yeah. And the big one, and lesser ones in Italy, I'm kind of dealing with that situation right now with a couple of people in Italy. They understand now in Italy, I think, viscerally, they understand that all this very expensive for them. You know, Italy's not making any more land. So when they give us land to build military installations, it's really politically difficult. They now have discovered that most of the land they've given us in the last 10, 15, 20 years for building depots, ammunition storage points, and so forth is going to Southwest Asia, going to Israel, is not going to NATO. So that's a problem there that'll flesh itself out and probably pressure to push us out of Italy. And then Ramstein, which is indispensable to our strategy to take on China straight on, that probably is on the chopping block within the next decade too, I would guess. And there are people in this country, people I talk to every day, that would love it. They would love it because their idea of cutting the defense budget and cutting it by at least $100 billion a year for a decade and regaining $1 trillion for other reasons and purposes is closing bases overseas and cutting down those costs of having those bases overseas. Not only that, those bases arguably, and I would be one who would advance this argument, those bases incite the empire to more military action around the world than is necessary. So if you bring them home and you have them located in CONUS, or you just stand them down altogether, you have less intent to use them and less reason to use them, which would be a good development, I think.
Yeah.
It also saves a lot of money. Last time I looked, it was just for the ones across the Atlantic, it was something like $70 billion a year to maintain them. Italy, Germany, Spain, other places, Norway, all these bases we have on bases like in Norway. Why is that American flag back there? This is a Norwegian base. I see the Norwegian flag. Well, that's the Americans back there.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing we do in Israel.
Yeah. I think the end of NATO would be hugely beneficial for European countries because they don't have foreign policy. The foreign policy has been defined by NATO, by the policies of NATO for such a long time. It could be a new era for European countries.
Yes, and it made sense for it to be that way when everybody thought the USSR was a big, monolithic, horrible, nuclear-armed enemy. We know now from historians who've looked into the Russian archives and studied with Russians and Russians with our historians, we know that we made a lot of that up in order to keep the military-industrial complex going and grow it. We made a lot of that up about the USSR, but we didn't make up their nuclear weapons. And so it was a formidable opponent in that regard. But it's not there anymore. And I don't think Putin has any designs on any countries beyond the one that impacted his national security, Ukraine. And he didn't even have designs on all of Ukraine, just that portion that impacted his national security that was along his border. We screwed that one up big time. And that was us. We did that. We did all of that.
Yeah. Larry, there is a website today was announced in Iran. In this website, people would register themselves as they're ready to die for Iran in this war, because Donald Trump was somehow the president of Iran he registered himself on that website and he shared it on X. And here is what the reaction of Candace Owens to what he did. Here is what she said, Larry. And let me just increase she says the Iranian president tweets that he is willing to sacrifice his own life for his people. Donald Trump was willing to sacrifice Charlie Kirk and is willing to sacrifice every American life and livelihood for greater Israel. Who is the animal again? Because Donald Trump was calling Iranian animals as well.
Yeah.
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 This is, yeah.
He doesn't care, and he doesn't know anything about any other country on the face of the earth, but particularly Iran. And that's bad in so many ways, but it's bad from the perspective of people who are telling him lies and he believes them. People like Laura Loomer and Stephen Miller and
Mark Levin.
Yeah, Mark Levin, who came out and reinforced with everyone that nuclear weapons were going to be used. I mean, Trump's using him. I hope he's just using him.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much. Let's see what would happen tonight. And I
8 o'clock is the witching hour, right?
yeah,
Is
exactly.
it 8 o'clock in Iran or 8 o'clock here?
No, I think the time difference between Iran and Eastern time would be something like
7 hours, 8 hours.
yeah, 7.5, yeah, something like that.
Well, Iran has probably 2 or 3 time zones in its own geography, doesn't it?
It's just one time zone, like Brazil.
So they don't do it. They don't make
Yeah.
differences. Yeah.
No, because
Smart
they're all
Smart people. Brazil's smart too.
yeah. We have the difference, the time difference in Brazil, but it's ignored. We have a unified time
Yeah.
zone here.
You have like
It doesn't
GMT.
change. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Iran the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you, Larry.
Take care.
Yeah.
See
Take care.
you
On
next week sometime maybe.
yeah.
I got to go to the
next week.
Eisenhower Media Network conference in
Yeah.
Columbus, Ohio. Garden spot of the United
On
States.
Friday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. See you soon.
My son-in-law is going to drive with me, so I'm looking forward to it.
Mm.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.